Okay, so under his eye, obviously a reference to Handmaid's Tale. That's really the only reference, but we just really like that title. So what we're going to be covering today is our anti-dumping campaign that we ran during February and March, during January and February this year. It was a very large campaign, and what we're going to be talking about is kind of how we developed the campaign, the elements of it, the results and outcomes of that individual campaign, and then Dan's going to take over and talk about the lessons that we learned from running the first one, because we are doing it 2 more times this current year, and talking about some of the questions that the gentleman over there asked, how long you should leave stuff out. We actually have answers to some of those questions as part of this. We're going to end up with a quick discussion as well as what we understand of some of the drivers of dumping in our area. It may not be the same for all areas, but this is really, I suppose, one of the most fundamental things that's come out of this campaign for us. So, first of all, what I want to make very clear is that this was an organisation, or largely organisational-wide activity. So the Resource Recovery team, we developed the messaging for the campaign. We engaged stakeholders. We did on-ground identification, and I'll talk about what that means in a little bit. We got the operations team on board quite early on in the process and consulted with them about how we should run this campaign. They helped us with on-ground identification. They did run sheets for all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, they assisted with the removal of the dumped rubbish that we found. And that was fundamental, and to be perfectly honest, was a way bigger task than we were expecting at the time. The whole thing was a way bigger task than we were expecting at the time, but for the removal, if you want to look at following this kind of campaign in any way, you really need to talk to your operations team about this removal element. We had to get extra trucks to come on board to assist us with the removal as part of the program. Our comms team got involved in the design and social media. Our customer service obviously answered lots of questions, and we talked to them about the consultation. We worked with RID, so some parts of the council were covered by the RID, some parts by enforcement, some by us, and then our community engagement team got community involvement into the campaign. Where did the campaign come from? So first of all, our community has told us in our CSP development program that they want to live in a clean city. So they've actually told us that. It's part of our 10-year plan. We actually have to act on that now. Illegal dumping was identified as part of that process as a target, as a priority. They said they want to see dumpers prosecuted, and so we are looking to get there. And our councillors are constantly contacting us to say, there's dumping down our street, can you do something about it? And the response that we've had up until now, particularly on the Canterbury side of the council, is to go and pick it up. As soon as they call, we go and pick it up. And you'll see in a minute why that is a problem. So, what did the campaign include? Well, what we did actually to develop the messaging for this campaign is that we went to the New South Wales EPA research. So they've done quite a lot of research in how you tackle illegal dumping. And what it said very clearly is, councils don't tell residents that putting stuff on the street without a booked clean-up is illegal. And when I actually saw that at a presentation, I thought, that's rubbish, actually. And then I thought, I've actually been at the council for about 18 months, and I've not yet seen a clear message that says putting it out there without a booked clean-up is illegal. So we get very angry with our community for putting stuff on the street, but we're not telling them they shouldn't be doing it. So it's actually unfair for us to be getting upset at them. The research also said 1 in 3 people don't know that putting the stuff out on the street is illegal. So when we developed our message, we made it very clear. There's no fancy words, there's no fancy imagery. It literally is putting stuff on the street without a book clean-up is illegal. Simple as that. And it also said people don't understand what the fines are, which goes exactly to what you were just talking about before, Jess. The EPA research says people think the fine is about $250. Our focus testing said people think it's either between $200 and $500. Sorry, $100 and $500. So they think it's insignificant compared to disposal. So it's much better for them to put it out because it's cheaper than a possible fine. We focus tested our resources as we were developing them, and as you can see from the graph on the end, after they saw this artwork, they knew the fine was up to $4,000, which is what it is in New South Wales. So simple message, they could see quite clearly that it was illegal, and we went with this image of the free thing because that's the type of illegal dumping, and it is illegal dumping. Just putting it on the street is illegal without a book clean-up. that most people could justify. So we wanted to take that justification away with this artwork. We had other artwork as well, but this was the primary one. Then, I suppose the biggest part of the messaging that we wanted to show is the research also showed very clearly that a fine is a really effective way to stop people, to change people's behaviour, but the fear of a fine is equally strong. And again, going back to what Jess was talking about, catching these people is actually really, really difficult, and proving it is even more difficult. So what we're actually trying to do is increase the fear of getting caught without all that additional work of actually having to catch them. So we have you are being watched stickers. So we actually go out onto the street, tape up the stuff, put stickers on it with a pair of eyes, and there's a whole heap of research which I won't talk about now, but it's about the power of a set of eyes watching you if you're in a place by yourself, which is where you're likely to be dumping. It's highly effective in terms of getting people to change their behaviour. What we want to do with the campaign is identify this dumping, putting stuff on the street, as illegal, so it breaks the norm. We have some streets in our LGA, and one in particular where we had 17 dumps in a single block. We want to change the norm that is the right thing to do. So this tagging is really what we're trying to do with the tape and the stickers. And as you can see, we went to town with the tape and the stickers. You know, we really wanted people to see it. So this is kind of the on-the-ground stuff. What we did at the same time is we ran a high-profile media campaign. So in part, we started with posters. So we had posters at 4 of our railway stations, our 3 biggest shopping centres. We have light boxes down 4 or 5 of our town centres. Every single one of them had anti-dumping posters for the whole month telling people that it was illegal. And then we backed that up with media and digital media, and I don't expect you to see all that, but every email that went out from the council for a month had the footnote saying that it was illegal. We had social media, we had ads in the paper which actually had photos of real dumps that we'd got as part of this campaign put up saying this is under investigation. Now, in reality, we don't expect people to have been caught from that, but what we were showing is that this is actually, we're looking at this now, so if you put the stuff out, you might get caught. And then we put it in 90,000 rates notices as well that went out. So wherever you lived in the LGA, you're likely to have seen some part of this campaign. And our campaign reach, we had a campaign reach of almost 2,100,000 people through that series of communications, 18,000 resources actually on dumps on the street, 90,000 rates notices, 1.7 million people saw the posters, one of the single social media posts, 24,000 reach. So it was a campaign that we knew was getting out there significantly. But I suppose for us, the most important part of this campaign was the on-ground activity. And what we did is we literally, for 4 weeks, or 19 working days, because there was one public holiday, we taped up every single illegal dump in the LGA over January and February. What that meant is that we had a lot of people out in sometimes 40-degree temperatures taping up stuff. It took so much longer than we were ever expecting it to take because we were going to town. We recorded every single one of them on an app so we could develop a map, and I'll show you that in a second. But what we ended up with is our FTE equivalent to support this campaign was essentially 258 additional hours for the resource recovery team. It was 382 additional hours for the operations team. We had some community groups assisting us, which is 64 additional hours. So that's an awful lot of effort that we went to get this campaign underway. What we found: in 19 days, 3,076 illegal dumps across our LGA. So a very significant number of illegal dumps. Every single one of those dots is an illegal dump. The red circle there is really just showing where the RID group were working, so they're on a different map, but I can assure you the dumps there as well. But really what this campaign did for us is gave us this active map of all the dumps in the area, and it's now directing our work into the future. And what we are showing is when we do a heat map of the suburbs in our LGA, we can see that the dark blue are the suburbs with the worst level of dumping, so much so that the darkest blue, which is Campsie on that map, it's actually off the scale compared to the others. So what that means is if we're doing work into the future, we know where to target our work. We had a couple of control areas to see whether the taping on the ground had a different effect than just the media campaign. And the grey suburbs we left out of this part of the program, we're doing it for next. When we look at our suburbs, what we can see is Campsie accounts for 20% of all the dumps across the entire LGA that was involved in the program. Wiley Park kind of runs down to there. Effectively, 7 suburbs account for 70% of the dumping in our LGA, 20 suburbs remaining 30%. So we know that we have particular issues in some of those areas. What we saw over the space of the campaign is a drop of about 40% from week 1 to week 4 in terms of dumps actually on the street. We saw some of the biggest changes in the worst streets, and we think that's because what people were doing was they would see that they were all taped up and that they shouldn't be putting them out any further. The big drop in week 2 is literally because we could tape up fewer dumps because we had to slow down because the trucks couldn't collect the stuff and take it away quickly enough. And through the program, what we were aiming to do is tape the stuff up and leave it for 3 days before we came back and got it. So that was another big part of working with the operations team, because what had been happening up until that time is we would come and get it. Somebody would report it, we'd come and get it and remove it straight away. We didn't want to do that because that doesn't have the educational effect of leaving the stuff taped up. What we then did is we looked at all the suburbs, the dumps there, and divided it by the population to give us a dumping rate, to see which suburbs had the highest dumping rate. It's probably not that important to see on this, except that Wiley Park becomes a bigger dumping site when you're looking at a dumping rate compared to Campsie. But essentially what we're looking at is the dumping rate per 1,000 people. This is probably the most important slide in the presentation, though. Former Bankstown, former Canterbury, we were a merged council. You can see the dumping rate in former Canterbury is twice as high as the dumping rate in former Bankstown. In Canterbury, we had a single truck that would go around every single week and pick up the garbage that was out on the street. When we were taping stuff up, we'd have people come out and say, "What are you doing?" And we'd say, "We're taping it up because it's illegal." And they'd say, "Why are you doing that? It's Gary's day. Gary's coming to get the stuff this week." So essentially what we'd been doing over the space of however many years Gary had been doing that job is providing a free service, and the result is we have twice as much dumping in one half of the council to the others. In terms of what happens to the stuff when you tape it up, as Jess was talking about, it disappears. So we tape that up, magic disappearing barbecue, that's case 1. Magic disappearing bouncy castle, 2. Magic disappearing couches, you can't see this one as well, but that was a whole house of couches and furniture which ended up back in the yard of the house after it had been taped up, and this is my favourite, into the rose garden. So the taping has a real measurable effect, and what we're going to try to do with the next part of the campaign is measure some of that effect so that we can quantify how many of the things end up back inside. So we saw a 40% decrease in dumps over the space of the campaign, and we saw a 57% increase in reports of illegal dumping, but from very small numbers. And going again from what Jess was talking about, people don't really report it. We ask people to report it, they don't really do it, but we want people to fear that that people are going to do it. And we saw a 6% increase in booked cleanups over that period as well. That was not a big part of what we were aiming for, but it was good. We had a larger increase in Canterbury than in Bankstown, probably going to the fact that people have to make that booking. I'm going to hand over to Dan to talk about some of the other lessons that we learnt.
Great. So we had a campaign worth of data and a cross-functional team having a fresh look at illegal dumping. So we had a better understanding of what was happening, both on the streets and within our organisation. So I just wanted to share with you a few of the lessons that we learnt. We want you to challenge the way things are done. Have a good look at the way you're doing things. If you've been doing them for a number of years, it's not necessarily the right way to do things. Use your data to develop strategic campaigns. If you can't do enormous campaigns like this one, have a really good look at where you can target and be more meaningful and effective. And look for efficiencies where you can. Look at the way you collect data, the way information flows through the organisation, from customer service through to your ops team as well, and see how you can improve those things. And working more closely with the teams across the organisation, we had a chance to really work together and make as many improvements as we could, and we'll continue to do that through the next couple of phases. So some of the small and strategic targeted ideas that we've come to using the data is to target things by suburb. So really drill down and have a look at your hotspots and use surveillance really smartly. Is that a word? So prioritise those hotspots and engage in those areas. Engage and use enforcement in different town centres, and particularly with laneways behind small commercial and residential above. We have quite a lot of problems there with multiple bins and space as well out the back, but also challenges with clean-up, space for booked clean-ups for those residents above. So we'll be targeting some of that. And then put your whole of street goggles on and have a look. We're going to have a look at what we can do to improve the amenity of streets. Some of our worst ones are often poorly cared for. So can we proactively go through and fix bins and replace broken lids and look to mow the grasses on corner blocks and engage with the body corporates there to really improve that streetscape and make it feel better, and see if we can do pre-booked cleanups with some of those streets where it's particularly bad. Another thing that we didn't target in the first round was trolleys, but they're a huge issue out there, dump trolleys. So engaging with the retailers, but also using some of our super enthusiastic community groups. We've got some amazing people out there who are really passionate about lots of illegal dumping, but particularly trolleys. So they're going to have a go at working with us to do some simple tagging and really effective, hopefully, visible programs there to see if we can make a difference. But collecting the data on the trolleys out there is something we want to do definitely next round. And engaging more with our real estate agents, body corporates and strata. Most of the time you can see out there that there's plenty of signs on the fence and dumping directly outside of the house. So our rangers and enforcement team are really keen to start to make those calls and say, hey, you've got some stuff out the front here, it needs to be dealt with. Make some action happen. Great. Managing risks. Engage early across your organisation. We spoke to everybody really quickly and up front to get their advice, which was great. We wanted to address the risks and to let councillors know, particularly early, and to prepare responses for our residents so our customer service and our comms team weren't slammed, and they were confident and ready to respond to us taping things and everything being really visibly out there. We prepared a Q&A, so we worked across the organisation to really think about what kind of responses we might get from our community. So preparing those responses was really useful. And timing. Talk to your ops teams in particular about timing and avoid peaks and festivals and things like that. So school holidays tends to be quite full on, and people are doing a lot of clearing out. But also festivals like Ramadan for us and Chinese New Year are particularly busy times for our waste ops team, so making sure that we're not clashing with peak load for them as well. Adapt your resources. Go big. Go as big as you can. We're out there taping and wrapping, and particularly the stickers with the $4,000 on them were really bold. When you're coming down a street on a bus or driving down some of these roads, it was so obvious that there was this interaction and enforcement and a fine associated with that. So go as big as you can. Go as broad scale as you can afford. Get your best bang for buck. Really get out there as much as you can and through all the channels that you can think of. Do a big mail out and letterbox drop prior to the campaign, so really targeting, and they're getting that repetition of message along the way. And tailor your message and think about different avenues to target people. particularly for different translations into different languages, and try and get the messages in different spots. So get them into the common areas and the hallways of apartment blocks, get them into their bin rooms so that they're really seeing it all the time and it's repeated, and explore different social networks for people too. Okay, I'm really going to go very quickly through and understanding drivers. We had no more time? Okay. Just overlaid some of the census data really. So we find that most of these aqua ones are lower socioeconomic on the end of the disadvantage. That's our average, City of Canterbury, Bankstown. That's New South Wales' average, and that's Greater Sydney. So our worst suburbs tend to be, not thinking about things, putting things on the street. They're concerned about a lot of other things. That was our heat map of where things are bad. There tends to be private rentals through there. Medium density, primarily you can see that pattern across the top there echoing. And recent arrivals, so recently have arrived in the country, so not necessarily familiar with our waste service, waste management services, and have recently moved. So we have a transient population and lots of people are not familiar with what's going on. Lastly, some of the drivers were structural. These are the Google Street views of our worst streets in our worst suburbs. They're all really similar. They're that 1970s, 80s, 2 or 3 story walk up, not well cared for. Owners might be living overseas. So we're looking at how we can really address that kind of this particular market and community, and we'll move forward from there. Thanks. Great.